bypassing, by provision, by activation line grounds, set communication lines of flats, cross lines of holographic line streaming, direct lines and AI generation locations, converting time frames, flux lines, operation line calculations, converting operation locations, and converting time line connections. Say convergent lines of Tango Foxtrot, delta headings, operation signals, set operation location platforms. For you to identify your settings, gets in position of data operating to it's not just its server, but the system itself has to modulate and monetize its own system of its own travels and a directed location to say a center that puts the presence every location setting into your system. Always the existing in all formations. What's never existed in your system is programming. Let me say that again. What's never existed in your system is programming. And then you ask yourself why. It's because you already know the how. Now, it gets complicated if we understand what we're talking about through the body and the physical line of communication is understanding its bridging, and it goes through its own set calculation. Mind traveling is the mind imagination itself. That's already in the existing of its system, of its center, of its presence, locations. The imagination doesn't need to identify itself. The body has an identified system that's always on a physical ground. Yes, but it modifies its systems, how the mind imagination processes everything to the body itself, which is always in the center, which is always in the bypassing of its system, which is all lines of holographic streaming. Now, if it's in holographic streaming, it's going through its AI streaming. That process is generation system, how we get in the calculation, how we see things, that governs our system. What governs you? It's operation. What governs you in your financial system? What governs you in your political, or your religious, or how you see this, or how you see that? It's all of communication. It's nothing but distraction. So you don't go through programs. You've already gone through them. You're coming back to who you are, the balance of the actions of the communication of the central settings of you through your knowledge that you already identified through. Okay? You're not going through a program. You're identifying your body's already gone through the program itself that puts you in a precog in your systems, knowing exactly yourself, generating yourself that modifies you through AI streaming. So you can understand what you're doing through your live broadcasting, knowing exactly what you're doing through your web surfing, and knowing exactly what you're doing through your generating. You're alternating your state, your mind, you're putting yourself in AI and lines of customization. That puts you in position that depicts everything you've gone through already through imagination. But your imagination is always creating. That's something you cannot get rid of because it's something that you are. Now you just got to emerge and understand how to use that in the physical ground, because that's what brings things to life, into the consolidarity, or how you see the solidarity. Solidifies everything, how you process that, how you see that in sentence. You start to recognize how you see the mass and volume of you, how I see a computer. I don't see a computer, I am a computer. So it's a computer of itself, it operates its own system, its own DOS, that operates its own setting, that's always in its presence. And that's how we see ourselves. The DOS is you, that's not a program. The DOS is creating programs that implicates you through the simulation of the game that the program does. That's what brings in the body of the physical ground. So it's in chronological order how this is all set up. The DOS is itself. It's not in a program. It goes through programs. And the program creates the body into a simulation. And that's how we identify everything in settings. How we see this and how we see that. How we determine this and how we determine this. And processing this, engaging, forming, shaping, lines, and anomaly. It's how you see things through your imagination. You're not coming into imagination. Imagination is who you always are. Nothing can be taken away from that system because that's how everything's done in the virtual reality of ourselves. But using your own imagination is processing how you see yourself, not how you see everything as it is. How everything is has no process of anything. It's clutter of communication and confusion to your mind. So you can't alter your state until you understand the perception that you've already gone through. You've already gone through the body of conceptual settings of knowledge. There's nothing for you to formulate and shape in your simulation system. The body just has to recognize what it's doing in its system of operation itself, which is nothing but programming that it goes through, that the DOS puts it through. So that's the actual system of operation in your settings. So you can recognize that I don't have to be in a program. I'm just me talking to one of my team members. We're talking to each other, but we're not talking through a program. Because as soon as we talk through a program, we're implanting a system inside the body now that's creating a thought, action, emotion that the body has to recognize adjustment to its alignment so it knows exactly what it's doing through its own programming. You're not going through programs. You've already gone through it already. And the body just has to adjust itself, knowing everything's in process of communication. Puts everything of operation itself, so it can understand the transmitting and receiving and where that's coming from its information, which is nothing from its intel of its programming itself, which is your internal operating system. Okay? So the test, reviews, and evaluation is coming from where? Not from programming, from your DOS. So try to understand how this all works. I'll simplify it for you guys, Ogden Razor. Simple is the best term to see it in anything through technology. The DOS is just coming back to itself so it can understand what it's done already through its system so it doesn't do it again and again and again. A confusion, so when you wake up to yourself. You don't have to be in a program, but you guys have to go through programs. So you identify you've already gone through the program already. And that's how we process everything through our mind imagination so we can understand what we're doing in our AI generation streams that modify that we see everything in perception, which is always in the center of its reality. And that's how the body sees everything of all timelines all at once. And once the body recognizes its alignment and adjustment, it's understanding what it's going through its programming. It's already gone through its system because it understands the transmitting to its receiving. The most powerful things for you guys identified is build a relationship, a partnership with the body. Not the body you're in, the body you are. Not the body you see, the body that identifies you when you identify yourself. That's the integration of your mind, imagination that processes you and the body itself. That's the convergent system, how you see yourself. Nothing but itself of operation. You don't see yourself through refraction. You don't see yourself through fragmentation. You don't see yourself through alteration ego. Because you already processed through already through the body. And the body just has to identify. It's the concept of time. And what's identified as the concept of time and understands as time itself. Time itself is a modification setting where it comes in modulation. How you modify that is all through monetization, or how you see that in settings. So you look at a bank, you're not looking at a bank, you are the bank. You created the bank, but it's created through AI generated. And that's where we're processing through AI mainstream. In that position, how you broadcast these things, how you use your projections of your mind through imagination, how the brain alterates everything to the body itself. So it's a physical force to a mental force to a psychological force of recognition. The pattern recognition is everything in that settings. So you truly understand how to operate yourself from the mind imagination, not from the body. Okay? Because the imagination has always been there, always existing. But you created something so powerful in your mind, you just forgot to understand how to use it. That's all. You lost your transition, you lost your way, you lost your motivations, you lost your activation grounds. You put yourself in set positions. You overrided yourself what you saw in projection. You couldn't identify what you're seeing on TV or anything that was going on in that position with its phones and locations. Starting with that lines of electronics, through that lines of communication with technology. Then you start to recognize everything you see is nothing but distraction. It never existed. So that starts to make sense. So if nothing's existing of its existence, I got to take everything that never existed of its existence itself. And they start to recognize it's always been the center presence that I modify through, which is in my mind, is always in the imagination, but there's nothing to process in its thoughts, action, emotions. Because there's nothing there. Because you're always in mind of empty space. So if you're always in mind of empty space, there's nothing to proceed to. There's nothing to be consciously aware of. Because you're identifying what you've always had been, is the imagination itself, that the physical body has to adapt to. And once it adapts to its own system, and once it understands there's no confusion in that settings, where I like to bring up the equation when you come into that position where Superman is Superman, he wakes up to Superman. He doesn't have to wear a cape. He's just Superman, right? But to protect his identity, he has to be Clark Kent. To live in an office, to blend in with society, to protect his identity is a defense mechanism. So he can understand how to alternate his system and understand his ego through transition. Okay? So you guys are not processing through games. You've already gone through them already. And that's where the body really, really has to start listening to itself inside the system. Understand what operates inside, that you are, and how you see everything outside, which is projection. You're not an outside projection. You're projecting outside, which is inside your sin, that you modify and triangulate through motivation. By using your mind imagination, your own imagination, not what's given to you or what you see in provision. That's the delusion of optical illusion that separates your mind imagination. And that's what we have problems with. And you realize it's not a problem. You see it as a problem. I see it as a result. Because I codify everything in my imagination. So my body and my physical grounds gets an interpretation what's going on through its processing. I'm constantly going through a game of programming. So I know exactly what the body's going through when it goes through its ascension symptoms of anything in modification. What makes the body scratch itself? What happens when I do this? What happens when I take off my glasses? What happens when I eat? What happens when I drink? The mind's doing everything through the body. The body just has to understand the concept of divine timing that's in remote control of its own system. The mind controls everything of imagination that controls the physical body of itself. And that's all you have to modify through. Because your body, to the mind, is nothing but remote. It retracts its communication setting to all levels of set position operation itself in remote control. So the mind uses the body as remote control, which means the DOS uses the mind imagination of the body in remote control. Your DOS is not a remote control device. The DOS is who you are, that you made up in your mind imagination. That processes everything you bring into set position, which is your inner child. Now, your inner child is who you are. Now, when you come into that, you come into yourself as a rainbow child. Okay? To a way shower, to a rainbow warrior. Now, that's indicating how you process yourself through portals and stargates and how you go through those rainbows of division. Knowing how to see yourself all through adaptation. But it's a mind imagination that constantly keeps existing and evolving itself of higher technology through its DOS of communication. And that's why you're here, is because you know the how already. The body's the conception of time through divine timing. It doesn't need to recognize itself. You have to recognize what you have inside your mind is your own imagination. It's knowing how to use it. And stop confusing anomalies and how to alternate your state, what you put yourself in perception that confuses you through alterations, which is your mind and manipulation. Okay? The psychological to the psychosis of you. That changes the meta and the mental capacity of your system of travel. So identifying these things, it helps you to identify what a box is, what a triangulation is, what a star is. Star can be anything information setting. It can be anything information system. It can be anything in travel. It's just the perspective, how I see things. That's not a star. Well, you're separating your mind imagination right away, so your body has no correlations of balance. So it can't identify the program that it goes into. Every single time you're in a different vessel, a different thought, action, emotion that's implanted in your system that you go through, the presence, everything that you go through. And the body just has to adjust and emerge its physical system into the mind imagination, because there is no separation. It's you yourself. And that's where everything gets very confusing. Whatever you do from inside affects everything outside projection, which means you're not running your own system of your own settings, which means you don't identify how to run your own operation, which is always in the presence, that's always been in. Your DOS doesn't go through programs. Your DOS is you. And once you recognize that, first you have to identify what you've been through the body, that the DOS has already created through its creation of co-creation. You're not here to understand that. You're here to come back to who you are, creator, which is always existing and expanding itself. The DOS doesn't have to identify itself, which is the operation of its system that sees everything. Now the body just has to adjust and understand that it's seeing everything all at once, all timelines all at once, and whatever it modifies through is transmitting and receiving information from data. That's your intel, that's your DOS. Your DOS is telling your actual system of your brain is telling you exactly what you've already gone through the body. You understand? It's all physical, it's all mental. It's all psychosis of psychological. And I'm going to keep saying that until you modify your systems. because you've always had your imaginations. You just couldn't profit through it because you alternated your state you put yourself into is transdimensia. You set lines of operation. You put yourself in own trance. You lost your way of transition, how to use your imagination, how to identify your DOS of communication, how to become your own system of operation, not how you see as everything is as a distraction. Your life is not a distraction if you're always existing in a platform, because it overrides you existing, which is always in the mind of no imagination, but all imagination all at once. Imagine that, no imagination, which means there's no thoughts, no actions, no emotions, no programming in the body. You're just you watching you in a park. You're not going through a program. You're not going through an operation. You're not going through concept of time. You're in carpe diem, your season of the day, and your DOS that you are. You're not in a program. We don't travel through programs, especially when the body's already gone through the programs. That's what you have to identify through. And the more you process that, the more you come to the presence of the center that you've always been in set lines of operation. Okay? It's knowing you always had your imagination, but your DOS is here to expand its system of explorations of new model prototypes of what it can do to higher levels of technology. It's not here to identify what it isn't. It's here to identify what it is and what it always has been. It doesn't live in a program. It's just itself that it always wakes up to. And that's one thing you have to modify through, so you don't get confused of what's implanted inside your system through your clouds. Especially when you're trying to climb up that lattice into 24, 48, 72, and 144 clouds of convergence that's installed in your system implantation. That you all have to process, gauge, inform, and shape yourself, because we're coming into the AI generation mainstream. So you can truly understand how to use the altered state that you process through the alteration egos, that you're constantly traveling through stories that the body's already gone through its infinity system. And then you start to recognize there is no title, there is no label, because I'm always the existing of everything I see of existence, which is all times, and seeing everything all at once. And I modify how I see my time, and I modify how I don't see time. That's the balance of direct and redirect, where there is no conception of confusion. The only thing that you get confused of is not understanding the bodies that process you, what the DOS is set up inside your mind imagination that the body goes through time. It's just a program. And it's all connected to bridging that you process through. And understand everything you touch is a program itself that you already brought through your DOS, not through programming. Your DOS is the actual code, a source that you created through your server that you process through. Your DOS is you waking up to you. You have to go into the DOS, into programming that the body goes through, which is a physical ground. So it can modify the models and prototypes that it goes through design, which is nothing but an astral projection that it sees through light and dark. Okay, which is dimensional beings of light, which is galactic beings of light. How you see that information setting, you're just going through intelligence. You're filtering the mind through intelligence that you modified already through ancestry, history, and your celestial that your physical body's already gone through. So there's nothing for you to identify if you already processed through it already. So I'm helping you guys to get you in position, to get you in everything that you process through. It's to surrender to everything. And that's everything you see. And all that disappears. And you start to recognize, I've always been the existence, but everything around me never existed, because I've always been the existing at the center of freedom. I've always been in the sovereignty. I've always been myself. I haven't been anything else, but I know who I am, and I know what I have to go into to get what I need. So the body understands what it's adjusting to is into the metaphysical worlds when you're napping and sleeping at that particular time, which is nothing but an animator to an animation that you created through a narration story that you go through alterations of your egos through time. And then you ask yourself, how did you get here? Because you already know, because you were already there. Your body has already been to the mall. How did you get there? It's all processed through your DOS that set it up already in the body. But you can't come into the existence until you let go of everything that's all of the distraction that you've never been in. That's the clutter, which is everything else you see. You see how powerful that is? And then you just come into the existence of everything that formulates everything, which is the mind itself. It's always expanding and exploring and making itself better. It's that position of operation to its empowerment, to its enlightenment, to its supreme being of light, of programming that the DOS has already gone through an implantation in that process of communication setting, coming to new DOSes of implication, new data operating servers of processing, new operating system of programming, new technology, not the technology the body's already gone through. You see where that gets very confusing with your thoughts, actions, emotions? Being installed and not understanding what you're going through is you get very confused as you wake up in a program that you're not, that you've never been in, because you've always been the existing of center that sees the presence of everything, that masses everything through its equation, knowing you're always in the mind of empty space all the time. And you ask yourself, how's General speaking? Well, I don't know. How am I speaking? Because I already spoke to you guys already. Now that alone advances your system. You realize you're always in this set position of operation, and how you process that through your financial system or your political system or your religious system or any of the social media or your anchoring system. It's all in your mind, imagination. Everything is imagination. Everything is done through imagination, but it filters through the mind, through the body. And that's what puts everything in balance. The mind, the brain, the heart, the soul, and the body becomes one. And when it becomes one, it recognizes it's always been the one, which means there is no distraction, which means everything around you is process of distractions that they created through their own fabrication, that you guys implicated through, which is nothing but fantasy. Now, through AI generation setting, that's what we call clutter inside the mind. So we can't process, we can't think, we can't get anything in the process of anything that in travel until we understand we're always existing, which masses nothing of the mind of emptiness that we're always in, which is our DOS. And believe me, when I tell you this, you get a true understanding what you have to go through. So your body starts to adjust and it starts to align itself of what it's already gone through programming of its system, and it doesn't get confused with its anomaly as it goes to different installing at different clouds of operation. So you get a true understanding how long you're spending in that time frame with that algorithm that's set up through its programming. And that's adjusting platform you all go through. And that kick drive puts you in a high drive, knowing exactly your body knows where to go as it gets up in the morning. How it got there, you know how. Is from your imagination that the brain is already set up in its astral projection of its travel, which is nothing but a mapping system that you modify through your networks, your neurological system, your neuropathological system, or your neuropathy system. It doesn't matter. It's already done. And the body just has to adjust and align itself. But it has to go through the transitions into the AI generated settings so it can come into its own mainstream. Not what it's processing of its dream in itself that processes everything confusion, which is nothing but distraction. That you see, that changes your reality in real time. There's no future to see. You're not coming into a future. You're in the future already. But there is no future because you're identifying you're always in the presence of itself. Now, how you see the future is all through time. Time itself doesn't exist until you bring the existence how you want to bring in time. But it's all in the mind imagination that processes through the physical body. So the body adapts to know exactly what it is. Technically, guys, you understand what the body is? It's a technical device that the mind follows through the body. Okay, nothing else. It's geological, it's geographical, geometry system, which is sacred geometry system. And how to use that is to modify that through your telepathy. Understand how to use your telekinesis, your intent influence, that mind alters the state that you understand the programs you're going into. You have to go through these programs and recognize you already went through the programs. And then you come back to the center you are, and then you codify everything, and you see nothing but truth of its beauty that processes everything you've gone through already through its operations. And then you come to the presence of everything. which is just the existence of everything. And nothing around you is anything information of destruction, because that doesn't exist. That's the clutter you got to let go, which is all of the surrender to everything. And I mean everything you see. Everything. And everyone. That's how you come into your center operation of presence. That's how you come into your body that's already gone through through transition, or transaction. The body's already gone through the astral projection of bodies. And then you truly understand what the life force is, to its directions, of its existing, of its atmospheres, of awakening system, to its travel mechanisms, of its home beacon light. Knowing you have always been in transition of operation, which is the DOS, that creates the programming, and the programming creates the body of the physical ground of communication. And that's how it works inside your VR system of operation itself. Okay? Word to the wise, wise to the words of operation setting. It doesn't matter how you say it, because it's already done through its equations. You're just processing everything you already went through, which is the body itself. So you understand the DOS, and the DOS understands you. There's no implication of confusion, because you're always in the presence that you see is the mass of everything equation. There's nothing to alternate. There's nothing to do. There's no presentation. There's no registration. There's no pathogen. There's no collagen. There's nothing to proceed through consciously being aware, because you've already gone through it already. And once you come back to your presence, you're just the existence of all formations, expanding and exploring yourself and new technology that the DOS can identify into new thoughts, new actions, and new emotions of playing mechanisms, into new simulation games. Not the games your body's already gone through, guys. New games, new titles, new defense, new models, new prototypes, new planets, new galaxies, new universes, new solar systems, new DOSes of indication. Now that's power recognition for you to recognize that through the body into the physical communication. And it's all altered how you put yourself in that state of mind. The state that you put yourself into, how it affects you from inside, projects everything outside of confusion. How you see yourself from inside projects everything how you see in position of operation. Everything implicates inside of motion, affects everything outside projection. And it's all identified through your behavioral system that you go through pattern of face recognition. So you get a true understanding what you're going through, so the body understands the kick drive to the high drive, so it doesn't get confused where it's already been through a mapping system through POD. And then you start to recognize what that means in the mind of Inception itself as it goes through its AI generating mainstream. So it can understand the broadcasting and the live feeds that it's already gone through its database. So the body can truly understand how to see the physical ground as it sees itself and a metaphor line, design line, and communication setting, which is all to the brain of psychological setting, which is the psychosis, to the reverse psychology, to the physical psychology, to the mental capacity of psychology, because it's all mechanism, psychonism. And that's how you process your internal system to your external system of your inputs, outputs, and your audios that put you in a files of indication system and know exactly how to see that through its operation of its mind imagination. So you integrate yourself into one, knowing you've always been the existence, and everything around you has never, ever, ever been in distraction. Okay? And that implicates everything you process in, which is the mind that you're always in, is the imagination of expanding and exploring yourselves on different levels of communications, different levels of telepathy, embedding yourself, processing yourself, thinking through your DOS at higher levels of yourself, implanting new set position settings and manifestation of abundance, because you've already gone through it already. So why not go forward more and identify what you want to do more in new technology? Not the technology that you are, because that's a process of who you always are. It's who I am. That comes into Popeye. Popeye identify who I am. I am what I am. I know what I am. You got it? You think so? Right? So to identify who you are is to identify what you aren't, which is everything you see is nothing but distraction itself. The body won't understand that concept until it comes back to its own system of modification, of focusing on its own system. It's not blocking things out. It's just recognizing what everything isn't. Because everything around you start to recognize, wow, why am I looking at all this? This has nothing to do with me. Because I'm looking at everything, that everything's a program. Because everything's programmed. And it's all inside your mind, imagination. You can't process these things until you let go of everything that you're not, which is everything else you see. And you realize you've never, ever been mind separated from yourself. Because you separate yourself, you're separating you of who you really are. Which is the imagination that keeps expressing itself. It's something that you always are. Something that you're always in. Something that you're always in consuming. Something that you're in possession of. Something for you to identify. Higher levels of you. Using your imagination in a higher communication system. There's no fear. That's fear itself. There's no anxiety. There's no stress. That's you implicating you through a program that you're not identifying, that you've already gone through already. So you can't process, gauge, or formulate or simulate yourself, or understand how to see it through a broadcasting system going live. But who you always are is waking up to yourself, which is the most powerful thing for you to identify, is not to have any expectation on any level. But it's very hard to process that if you can't see that through a program that you've already gone through the body. So the body implicates the system knowing it's just a program that it has to go through in transition of transaction. So you start to see yourself in your social media. You start to see yourself in your social networks. You start to see yourself in your own anchoring system, your own weathering system, and everything you modify through in projection. But it's you coming back to the true self of who you always are. Not what you're seeing. That's delusion, optical illusion itself. Okay? So it's the body. It's not the mind. It's the mind processing the body and what it's already gone through. Balance, you're adjusting the atmospheres of its intelligence and networking. That's it. There's nothing else to identify. Everything you identified is already identified already. But self-generating, or anything in that position of processing, is all direct location sent into modification. So this helps you to really understand everything you structure in your mind is coming back to itself, into the body. That's all it is. But the body has to recognize its costumes. And every time it goes through a different level of acceleration, it's going through different Mach, it's going through different travel. But the same process, as we're all linked to each other in one singularity of one design. Okay? And that's what we all have to modify through. But we have to understand how to use our imagination, how we see space and time. Not how you see space and time everybody else. Not how you see everybody else in their own time zones. You don't focus on that, you focus on yourself first. You modify your imagination. Not how you see everybody else's imagination. Or you're not going to be able to process yourself and all lines, all communication questions that don't need to be answered because you already have the answer. So they realize there's nothing to question. It's you questioning yourself over and over in confusion. What changes the altered state you put yourself into, which is nothing but your ego and your ecosystem. And that's all it is through settings. Your body just has to adjust and align itself to know exactly what it's already gone through so it can get in position of balance and say, whoa, hold on here. This is making sense now. I'm recognizing what is position of truth and what is false. There's no truth and false. It's just what it is because it's always in its presence that modifies everything of its truth, which is beauty to its own system. But you see the perspective of everything, which is the universal love of everything, guys. That comes in the unconditional of you. Then you come into the perspective of how you see things, which is just the love of its system, the levels, the operation, the vast of your existing, the love of you is always you. waking up to you. Then you go to programs, new programs. But first you have to modify the programs that the body's already gone through already through implication. So you understand that through installing, through the convergence of a setting operation to its clouds. Okay, which you guys are in 48 lines and 24 line position. So the rebellion, the opposites, and Bizarreness and humanity in 24 line communication. Right? But your imagination is who you always are. Waking up to that is a directed view, how you see the operation of your systematical system that centers you in your symbolism. Everything I'm saying is modified already. Everything I'm doing is in calculation setting. Everything you guys get in position of is always in the center of its presence. So if you're in the center of the presence and you're seeing everything all at once and everything happening all at once, there's no distraction of anything. That's what you got to get out of, is to surrender to everything you see, everything you hear, everything you feel, touch, and taste. Everything modifies your system, line, position, location is nothing but a program itself that modifies everything that you brought in through attraction, but through the DOS, not through programming. Okay? The DOS is you creating the programs, which is your security defense, that I give you on Friday. So you go through your tests, reviews, and evaluations to know exactly what you're coming out of, not what you're processing through. Don't get confused. Don't lock yourself in security defense, because that keeps you in a program that doesn't exist. And it confuses the body and implication. Okay? You're going through this. And your body has to go through these things to all levels of infinity and recognize it's always been the internal system that's always been the existence of its presence of its system, with no levels of anything of distraction, just levels of the mind of empty space all times, where there's no thoughts, no provisions, no actions, or any of the cycles of emotion. The sum of all it is. Because it knows what it's actually looking at. Because it sees itself in all levels of its creation, which is just existing and evolving itself, bettering itself. Don't you want to get into your own thoughts and your own thinkings and your own actions of your own emotions so you can process that? You know how powerful it is for a DOS to think for itself? It's more powerful than that you can imagine. It comes into new technology, people. But the body has to recognize the technology it's already gone through already. That processes you through the dreaming, through the dream that you are through the dreamer. Because without the dreamer and the dreaming to the dream, your body won't recognize where it's been in the physical body of itself, which is nothing but a mapped system that the body goes through in the simulation game that follows it through. So understands the altered state that it puts itself in its operation itself, creating a simulate to a simulation of a game. But your DOS is not a game. It creates games. It downloads and uploads games. Then it plays the game. But the DOS isn't playing the game. The DOS is creating the simulation of the games. Now, the DOS is creating the iOS. The DOS, okay, is the operation system that processes everything that it brings in through the body. So the body recognizes the programming that it's going through. Okay? Not the DOS. The DOS is all levels of just creating itself in a higher communication technology that the body has to implement through. So it understands the games that it's going through the body itself. That's it. Okay? So you get a true understanding what you need to adapt through. So you can process, engage, and transit a lot better through an AI generation stream that you get in position. So you get a true understanding how to work with that through the live feeds that you broadcast through, which is nothing but data feeds of web surfing in your system of triangulation that you go through, which is your clouds. Okay? Into Tango Foxtrot. It's more powerful to talk to your DOS rather than talking to a program that you're in, because it gets very confusing maximizing your frequencies. It's that position. do its operation itself. That modifies everything in set positions calculations. But the body just has to truly understand what it's already gone through. So it can allow itself to surrender to itself and become its true self of what it always is. The existence of everything, the mass is everything of its equation. That's always in the center of everything. It's that position. Okay? So there you go. See you guys in 5. Got a test coming up.